Just imagine. I'm not going to start it like that. Or maybe I will. A loving couple just got married and decided to take a honeymoon all to themselves. But after getting lost, they stumble upon a craft hovering over the road, with creatures lining the windows. After a closer look, terror takes hold, and they both turn around and drive back as fast as they can, still confused from what they saw. Then finally, once arriving home, they realized the couple hours long drive had taken them just over 3 hours. What happened to the couple during this missing time? Well, let's find out. This is the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill. I'm going to look into the camera when I say it, because I every single time.
I'll just answer the question to what happened.
They got abducted by aliens.
Yeah, I mean, but their 2-hour drive became just over 3 hours. Honestly, that just means they might have gotten off at the wrong exit at one point and just added a little bit more to their traffic. It's not that bad.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us for this episode of I'm Not Crazy. That was it.
I got a pin loose in my hat.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to I'm Not Crazy. My name is Andrew Benor. I'm your host, and we're joined today with Mike. He's back. We're doing another Alien episode. Woo! We're doing Betty and Barney Hill, which is great because I love this story specifically.
Very true.
And it's been 2 months, so I need to get it the fuck done. This is the second time we're doing this one because just full transparency, so if things don't seem surprising to us, that's why. But this is just part one. Part two, we haven't done yet, and I have some surprising knowledge for you in part two, so I'm excited about that. What do you got to say for yourself?
I'm pretty tangled up here.
I like how you're just getting undressed.
I got this one sore tooth. I got a cavity that I got to figure out what's going on with that. So,
cool. Wow.
But, I'm doing okay.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
All right. So the sources. The sources mainly captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. Where's the book? Cool. Thank you. So this is our main source for today. This book is fantastic. You should read it. There's obviously going to be a lot of detail that I can't get to. I had to specifically not make this a 3-part series because it would have been a lot of boring information, but the book is very good. If you're interested in it, you want to know every little detail, this is the book to get. It is written by human Ewok, Stanton T. Friedman. He looks like an Ewok. Just look it up. And it's written by him and Kathleen Marden, who is the niece of Benny Hill. Not Benny Hill, not the English comedian. Betty Hill.
Betty.
The Interrupted Journey, which is the original book by John G. Fuller, will also make an appearance from time to time, though this book does cover most of the story pretty in depth, and it fills in the gaps from the Interrupted Story, the Interrupted Journey. So this book is kind of an all-in-one, so you don't need to read that, but, if you want to, that one's there as well. I would highly recommend Captured, as I said, if you want more info, as the book is filled with a plethora of details and really does a decent job of setting the record straight, with Friedman and Martin passively aggressively taking shots at Fuller and his telling of the events.
And if you finish Captured, you actually get to the second book in the series, Caught.
Yeah.
And you find out what comes next.
Yeah. Now let's get to the story. Who are the Hills? Mike, who are the Hills?
There's Betty.
Mm-hmm.
And there's Barney.
Uh-huh.
And Barney.
B&B Hill.
Barney was a businessman.
He was not a
Barney business.
He wasn't a businessman.
And Betty worked for the
Crocker
book factory.
All right, I'm going to cut you off there. So, I lied. We're not going to get to the story now. You remember when I said, let's get to the story? I lied a little bit. Sorry. Before we get to the story, it is imperative that we understand the Hills deeply. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You get it.
Yeah, tell me about it.
As abduction victims, they are immediately treated as crazy, which I find to be unfair, and this is why. The Hills before the abduction could be described as hardworking, respected people, with both having backgrounds in civil works and social work. The two met in 1956, quite a long time ago.
It was a good year.
Really? Why?
A lot happened.
What happened? The two met in 1956 when Barney and his soon-to-be ex-wife visited a Hampton Beach resort. Do you know what it was called? Neither do I. Where Betty and her family worked. The two would meet and hit it off as friends. As friends. They did not have affairs. Okay? They're good. They have good moral compasses, as Steve Harvey would say.
Good.
Or what does he say? Is it a moral barometer? Sorry. They have good moral barometers.
Good.
Appreciate that. And then they would part ways, not thinking much about their time that they spent together realistically, because they just kind of met as friends. They spent a week together with a group of other people, and then they were gone. Betty, having been divorced already, which is kind of controversial for the time, having had a rough time in her first marriage, she married a nice enough guy named Bob Stewart, who she would describe as follows. I'm not going to do the Betty voice.
Why don't you just do it?
Fuck. Because it's really annoying. Because I really like Betty a lot. I got to tell you, right? I fell in love with the woman.
So
like
I think she's pleasant.
Hold on. I think she's great. I think she's fantastic. But she has the strongest fucking Boston accent I've ever heard. And when she says Barney, we watched the movie, right? We're going to play a clip from it in a little bit. But we watched the movie. And in the movie, she just, it's Barney. And I thought that she was just being an actress and it's worse. It's worse in real life. They toned it down for the movie.
I love it.
It's wild.
You should do it.
Bob Stewart. See, I can't do it.
Bob Stewart.
There you go. Do it. Do the whole thing, front to back.
Bob Stewart seemed like the best thing on the horizon, so I grabbed him. Either you went to college or got married, so I got married. I thought he was a pretty good guy, frankly. It took me years before I found out different. These were the days when most people didn't even have jobs. We were coming out of the Depression. He was hardworking, and anything wanted, he got it for me.
Mike, can I just tell you that you fucking brutally missed the accent?
Yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
But I like that one better.
No,
it's a lot less annoying.
Right.
So it wasn't all that convenient. The marriage that we just described. I mean, if we want to talk about what she said, she basically said, you had to either, get married or find jobs, and I didn't want to work. So I got married because it was the Depression and we couldn't find jobs. Shortly after marrying, in 1941, Bob's ex-wife had remarried also and had her own kids with the new guy. And when she found out Bob had remarried, she dumped the kids that she had with Bob on Bob and Betty. Which is interesting. That's Bob and Barney and Betty. It's just, there's a lot of bees. Young Thug would be proud.
Why?
Because he is a big blood. Big bees in this bitch. With Betty eventually adopting those kids, his first marriage, because she adopted them and raised them as her own. Which, she did a very good job at. She was very close to them until she died. And she actually wound up leaving him, again, obviously, because I said divorced. And she used the divorce settlement money to move her new home. So she didn't move to a new house. They were going to buy the property. So she was able to get the property. She was able to get the house for $1. And she sold the property for a certain amount of money. And then she used the money that she got from the property sale to literally get a crane to pick up the house and put it somewhere else, which I didn't know you could do.
Good for it.
I had no idea that you were able to do that. She would go ahead, she would get the new house, she'd move to the new land, and then she would go and get her bachelor's degree. Wow. Good for her. As for Barney, unfortunately, is little known about Barney's early life. And now Barney is kind of unfortunate in this whole story because I just want to put it out there right now. Betty is 100% the star because she is the white lady. And he is just kind of seen and written as her bumbling husband who is black. And it's crazy because they have the exact same education. They went to the same schools. They taught the same places and they had the same jobs. They just, for whatever reason, we know the reason, but that's how it was written.
It's so interesting. So I see him as a lot. And I mean, I guess now I'm sexist here. I see him as a lot smarter in the situation than what I've heard of the story. Because what I've heard of the story is she's like, oh no, aliens. And he's like, relax.
The way that Betty talks about the story is she's like eager to learn more and she's like persistent and she'll do anything she needs to. And Barney's just like, you gotta shut up. I don't know if you realize, but I'm black. That's literally the entire thing. And he's like, what are you doing? You're going to get me murdered. Like, legitimately.
And that's fair.
Like, one of the things is when they went on their honeymoon, they couldn't stay at a hotel in Canada because they didn't know what the civil rights were like in Canada. So they were afraid to stay at the hotel because they didn't know if he was going to get hurt in the middle of the night.
Jeez.
So they had to come back to America. And that's what caused them to come back early, which caused them to get abducted by aliens. So racism caused aliens. As for Barney, little is known about the man in his early... He was said to be a very intelligent, respectable man who cared deeply for his friends and family. We know that he dropped out of high school because he needed to work before joining the military in 1941, the same year that she got divorced, I believe.
Something else happened in 1941. I forgot. I feel like something big happened.
I think it was the third one. So he served for 3 years. Interesting. As a marksman and a truck driver, two very different jobs. Marrying his first wife, Ruby, and having their first son. After he was discharged due to a grenade accident, which knocked out all of his teeth, which we're going to talk about that in a second, he would go on to have his second son before his marriage fell apart, leading to the reunion of Betty and Barney Hill. Grenades. You know how grenades work. You like military things. You're one of those guys. These they don't really knock out teeth. So I'm thinking that this grenade didn't blow up. I think that this grenade was thrown at him and hit his mouth.
Yeah, or he fell on a grenade and cracked
Which
his
is
teeth.
kind of very funny to think
very
about.
possible,
Very
too.
funny. But yeah, so he was discharged because his teeth were knocked out by a grenade. So I wonder what the story is to that. I'm sure that there's more to it, but I don't think we'll ever know. I think
not.
that's lost information.
Yeah, that's done.
So now that they were both single, and with Betty working closely by Philadelphia while in school, they reconnected and quickly began a romantic relationship. But once Betty graduated, she would move back to Portsmouth to work for the New Hampshire Division of Welfare, which is that would be her job for quite a while. With her and Barney keeping the relationship alive, Barney working as a postal worker in Philadelphia. So this relationship is kind of nuts. She was going to school near Philly. He worked in Philly. That's where he grew up and where he lived. His sons were in Philadelphia, all that. And once she graduated, she moved back to New Hampshire. And then Barney was basically driving back and forth from New Hampshire to Philadelphia on a daily basis.
That's insane.
It was like a 6-hour drive. It was insane. Eventually, he grew tired of driving back and forth on a weekly basis. So he transferred to a post office in Boston to be closer. Now, the problem was this was still a 4-hour day commute. It wasn't near, it was closer than Philadelphia, but it wasn't close. That was the problem. So he needed to work nights. This combined with no longer being able to spend time with his sons definitely had a negative effect on Barney, but he really, really, really loved Betty genuinely and really saw a future with her. So they were married shortly after May 12th, 1960, and it took place in Camden, New Jersey. And I found out it's because their interracial marriage was not legal countrywide. So there was only a handful of states that it was legal, and Alabama didn't overturn that law until the year of 2000. Isn't that interesting?
Camden
2000.
is,
You couldn't marry a black person in the year 1999 in Alabama. That's
insane.
fucking nuts.
This is the world we live in.
It is not, because that was 2000.
Well, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it was 23 years ago. Though race obviously played a huge role in Barney's life, it was said that the couple themselves rarely encountered pushback in New Hampshire, with Betty's friends and family being surprisingly accepting. And I think the reason is because it was a military town. Peace Air Force Base was like the main thing in the town, and this is in the 60s. There's no fucking Walmarts and shit. So the main job in town was working for the military, and I think him being a past military man kind of helped him, and it helped elevate his status in town. And it wasn't just Betty's husband; it was the the veteran, more or less, Betty and Barney also focused largely on civil rights and social change, with both of them being very active members of the NAACP in Portsmouth, and Barney also being on the local board of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. Betty was the secretary for the NAACP, and I believe that Barney was the president at that time. The two were so busy, in fact, that they weren't able to take a honeymoon, which leads us right into the start of our story for real this time. Now, it was 15 months before they were able to take a honeymoon from when they got married, because they were so busy. And because he was working nights and all that, they couldn't take the time to go. So any free time that they had was spent working and doing stuff and doing the things that they like to do.
Yeah.
So now that we got all the real,
we know who the hills are.
the background out of the way,
The
now
hills
it's
have
time for the
eyes, right?
fun part. They did have eyes.
They had eyes
it would
in
be
their
hard for
heads.
this if they didn't.
Because they saw the aliens.
Yes, actually, weird, but that's going to come into play. That's so strange. The interrupted journey.
Oh, God.
All right.
All right.
And now, finally,
All right.
it's time.
Is it?
As we already said, the Hills married in May of 1916, with them not taking
1916?
1916. Barney was still driving a 4-hour day commute and almost spending any time he could with his sons in Philadelphia.
Oh, Philly.
So
I've never been there.
The two decided to take a trip as a last-minute getaway from a very hectic schedule. Very hectic. They packed a few bags, their little dachshund Delcy, into their 57 Chevy, and pulled together their modest budget of $70, which is the equivalent of $704 today. So basically, you take a weekend trip, $704.
Yeah.
You're frugal, you get away with that. That's fair.
Yeah.
Maybe not now, but a couple years ago. There was
economy.
there's also a thing that said that maybe they forgot to go to the bank, and because it was the weekend, the banks were closed, and this is 1960, so there's no ATMs. So maybe that had something to do with it, but I do not know. That's information that's not... We already spent too much time on it. They would end up driving through the night, eventually making it to Niagara Falls. They drove to the parking lot. They didn't drive to the falls. That would be very tragic for them. And after a night there, they headed to Montreal, Canada.
Whoa. Again,
spending a night there. On Tuesday, the Hills would decide to make their way downtown, but after getting lost, because again, 1960, the directions were in French. I don't know why. Neither of them spoke French from what I knew, and I would say that's evident because of the fact that they got lost and they couldn't read it. While also being in danger of Tropical Storm Esther, the two begrudgingly began their exhausting early return back to Portsmouth. Though they did want to arrive home at a reasonable time, the storm was a day away at least, so they took the scenic routes in an attempt to make an early trip back worth it. This eventually led to the White Mountains of New Hampshire, where Betty marveled at the stars in the clear night sky. And while looking through their binoculars, Betty noticed something odd about one of the stars she's been looking at. Barney. There's a star, Barney. It's following us, Barney.
Enough.
Betty began using the binoculars to follow what she thought was a shooting star. Barney, it's a shooting star, Barney. After the said star fell for a while, it would stop in the middle of her view, with her excitingly thinking, oh, it's a satellite. But as she excitingly kept watch, it continued to move erratically, this time going in the total opposite way, flying across the moon like E.T. While Betty is marveling at the anomaly in the sky, Barney tries to reason it away, claiming to be a regular plane. But Betty insists that he pulls over and sees for himself. So he does just that, takes his binoculars and internally shits his pants, knowing that's definitely not a fucking plane. Trying to keep Betty calm, he suggests that they get in the car and look for a cabin to stay in before it's too late, hoping they could escape the object. But as they drove down Route 3, the object would continue to follow them, descending closer and closer.
That's terrifying.
It is genuinely scary.
I mean,
it's very scary. And I will just put it out there now. This story has changed me a little bit. My skeptical wall has been broken down a tad.
Really?
This story, I don't know. This story's fucking weird, and I really, this is scary as shit.
I want to see something, but I don't. You know, I really don't. But
do you know how many times at night I'm just sitting here on this couch and I'm looking, and there's a window over there, and I'm looking, and every once in a while I'll look out the window and just I just want something to be standing there.
What if?
Just one day, just something.
What if?
You know, to be like, hey, and then just run away.
That's still one of the most successful things in the movie Signs, I think, is when you see the alien and it's like, it's just there.
I gotta tell you,
we're not gonna do it. It's one of my favorite movies. We're not gonna do it.
No. I just gotta tell you, you have mentioned Signs in every episode that you've been in since you've been on the show. It's unbelievable. The movie is good, I'll give you that, but it's not that good, like, you know.
I know.
You know, like in the movie Signs when the alien gets shot.
Do you know, like when they sacrifice Christ in The Passion of Christ? I think you could equate that to Signs.
Oh, by the way, Nick told me that I have to tell people to do something to the like button. So make sure you have
hit that like button.
Make it a big turkey dinner. While making their way around a huge granite bend, the road opens up, giving them a beautiful view of what would become their worst nightmare. Directly in front of their vehicle, about 100 feet in the sky, a large hovering disc hovered silently. Now, here's the thing. I love this book. Sometimes it's a disc, sometimes it's a cigar-shaped object. I don't know if a cigar-shaped disc is a thing. So I'm going to say that I'm confused about what it is. Barney reached under the seat and pocketed Betty's gun, which she had in the car in 1960, put the binocular leather strap around his neck, and got out of the car and apprehensively approached the craft, which was said to glow, yet there was no light seen reflecting on the surroundings. That's the scariest thing, this light thing. It comes up again. He was able to get a good look from the binoculars, seeing the rim of the disc was covered in huge window panes. And to Barney's horror, something was watching him back. Lining the windows were gray humanoid beings staring back at Barney, with others working in the background. With, quote, German precision. Completely frozen in fear, Barney stood there as the queef.
As the queef.
It's the queef. It's a pussy fart. It's just a big pussy fart. Completely frozen in fear, Barney stood there as the craft slowly descended towards him, while fins tipped with red light started to come out the side of the craft. Like this. I don't know why I did the eyes. The craft doesn't have eyes.
Just blinking at him.
This is the moment Barney realized if he didn't run away, he was going to be captured. Like, that was what that is. He said, if I didn't run away, they were going to take me away. That is terrifying. So he turned around and ran back to the car in near hysterics, which is kind of funny to think about, screaming how they needed to get out of there or they were going to get captured. Once in the car, Barney sped down the road. He turned the car on, obviously, first. He sped down the road, hoping they would lose the craft, but it kept up effortlessly. Then they described hearing a rhythmic beep. Like that. Which seemed to be hitting the truck and vibrating.
Oh.
The trunk, I'm sorry. And vibrating the car. So it would hit the trunk and then they would feel the beep in the car.
That's
really,
terrifying.
yeah, really
It's like an
interesting.
earthquake that's happening on
It's
them.
like a little mini controlled earthquake to just their car.
I hate
That's,
it.
yeah.
Oh, I hate that.
After a few minutes, the beeping would return. The Hills at this point have a vague memory of a roadblock, but they must have kept driving, losing the craft in the process. They tried to find an open restaurant, but were unsuccessful and decided to drive the rest of the way home. But since it was midnight, they shouldn't have arrived later than 3 a.m. But after they arrived in Portsmouth, they were shocked to see the sun dimly lighting the sky. Lighting. Shit. It was about 5:30 a.m., leaving the Hills completely puzzled.
But it's not like you can just be a little bit confused on time. Like,
We'll get into that. The distance is mapped. Like, it's not like they never did this before. The full drive is in New Hampshire. They're not in Canada when they start. They're in New Hampshire. They're on Route 3 in New Hampshire. Like, they drove there. So driving back to like, that's like me saying that driving to your house, which I've done before, right? It takes 15 minutes. That's like me saying, oh, it's going to take me an hour and a half to get there, and misjudging it by that much. That's crazy, you know? Now, it's hard to convey exactly what Barney felt in that field, all alone looking up at this giant craft hovering above him. But actor James Earl Jones does an amazing job describing it in the 1975 TV movie adaptation, The UFO Incident. James Earl Jones is incredible, and Estelle Parsons captures Betty so well. At times, it could have legitimately been the audio of Betty speaking with her just lip syncing because it was that close.
I am James Earl Jones.
That was super close also.
All right.
So I'm going to play you that clip,
Yeah.
and we're going to talk about it because it's really fun.
I want to hear it.
So this is Barney Hill being played by James Earl Jones.
Incredible actor.
Incredible. Yeah, honestly, this movie's great. It's really goofy.
It's called The UFO Incident?
It's called The UFO Incident from 1975. It's based off of The Interrupted Journey, so we're going to get into the problems with The Interrupted Journey. There's quite a few problems, and most of it's just a lack of information. He takes the most interesting parts of the story and just makes it into a narrative that just kind of isn't the story. So this is what this whole book is basically for, is to debunk the entire first book and to set the record straight, which is a very interesting take, but this movie is based off of that. So it's very emotional, and there's a lot of
Is
yelling.
there anywhere I could find this?
Yeah, YouTube. It's for free on YouTube, yeah. Okay, so this is the part where James Earl Jones is explaining as Barney Hill what it felt like to be in the field looking at the UFO.
I feel like a rabbit.
What do you mean by that?
When I was hunting for rabbits in Virginia, this cute little bunny went into a bush that wasn't very thick, and my cousin Marge was on one side of the bush and I was on the other with a hat, and this poor little bunny thought he was safe, and it tickled me because he was just hiding behind this little stalk that meant security for him. And I pounced on him and threw my hat on him and captured the poor little bunny that thought he was safe. Isn't that funny?
This is the
I
best
thought of that, standing out there in the field. I'm that bunny.
I'm that buddy.
I'm that bunny. But I will say, right now, understand that he was under hypnosis in the movie at this point, so that's why he's delivering it the way he is.
Yeah.
But just the whole idea behind the story is like weirdly terrifying. It's that he said, like, basically he went hunting when he was a kid in Virginia, and him and all his friends found a bunny, and they all surrounded it, and the bunny ran into a bush, and it thought that it was hidden because it couldn't see them. But we as humans are so much bigger that we were able to see the bunny.
Yeah.
We were able to capture it like nothing, and the bunny was fighting for their life, and I gave no energy getting that bunny. He said that's basically he was the bunny.
That's
very genuinely scary. Genuinely very
it's
scary.
It's knowing you have no control of a situation.
Yeah. And
I feel like there's audio. Doesn't this exist? Isn't there an interview of both of them
Most
somewhere?
of what you've heard is probably from the movie, because there are interviews, but they're not out to the public. There's only certain little parts that are out, and most of them are Betty. They're not really Barney.
I've heard Betty speak, yes.
Well, Betty lived until 2004.
And
so
she did interviews.
She became kind of obsessed with UFOs after that.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, this movie it's really, really great. Like, even if you don't want to read the book, go watch the movie. The movie's really fun. I watched it with Chris. We had a great time. And the aliens themselves, Chris, I gotta tell you, in the movie, the aliens are these humans, and then they have giant superimposed like human eyes on them, almost like the screaming orange or the laughing orange, whatever the fuck that thing was called.
Yeah. Oh, I don't like that.
It was basically that, right? And it's really funny to look at. Chris, I swear to God, they have a drawing from 1970. They nailed it. It's the exact same thing. Yeah, this is exactly what they were supposed to look like. So go watch that. It's a good reference for what those things are. They did a really excellent job for what they had. The aftermath. Shout out Dr. Dre. Though they were confused about the possible time loss, they both claimed to be relaxed and almost awestruck, with Barney telling Betty, quote, "This is the most amazing thing that has ever happened to me," which, understandably, that is by far the most amazing thing that's ever happened to them.
Yeah, I would think.
They spent the rest of the morning hours wide awake, silently looking out the window at the morning sky. They both confirmed to each other that this was real and it all happened, but didn't go into detail as the relaxation was starting to make way to unsettling fear. After a few hours, they both decided they should start to turn in for the night and just kind of give it till the morning and figure out what's going on. So they get home, they stay up basically the entire day, and they're it's almost like anesthesia is wearing off, and they're starting to realize that they just had surgery and they're in pain. They were kind of losing that adrenaline rush of, oh my God, we get captured by aliens. And it just became, oh my God, we got captured by fucking aliens. And they just became really scared, understandably. And once they woke up, Barney suggested that they go into different rooms and draw the craft the best that they could.
That's a smart suggestion.
Once finished, they noted the picture. I read that already.
I think they were just dropping acid. That was it. Yeah.
Once again, thank you so much for joining us. This is now a half a part episode. Mike figured it out. They were just doing drugs, turns out. Who would have thought? So, so the pictures were near identical. This caused Barney to become so unsettled immediately that he just started panicking, was like, Betty, we can't tell anybody about this. They're going to think we're nuts. And he more or less said, like, I have a hard enough time I have a hard enough time feeling like I belong. This is going to make it so much worse. And I think that for Barney, just naturally, I think he was always felt inferior. And you said before it was a lack of power that he had in the field. And we're going to see that Barney's biggest problem with the UFO abduction isn't the fact that he got abducted. It's the fact that he has no power to stop it or to do anything to help Betty. Because in his brain, it is 1960. A husband is supposed to watch a wife and protect her at this point in time. Now, for a black man to marry a white woman at this time, that expectation now doubles for him. So he is now, everyone is looking at him to make sure he's doing the right thing. And he feels like this is going to be detrimental, and again, reasonably so, to his reputation and the way that people look at him. I can't imagine what the fuck this poor man went through for the last 10 years of his life. Like, legitimately, he was just haunted by this for the last 10 years of his life.
I can only imagine what he saw when he fucking died. Like, what?
I just wonder, like, I would love to be in the binoculars when he looked through them, just to see what the fuck he saw. That would be so cool. You know, imagine we just looked through and just fucking trees and just made it all up. How disappointing that would be.
That's,
you know,
kind of, it's giving me anxiety. I'm just freaking.
What, they made it all up? Okay.
It's real.
But they would starkly disagree, and the two of them would spend most of the days pacing around the house, noticing little things were off with their stuff that they didn't notice because they were just kind of full of adrenaline. So one of the things is Barney's shoes were scuffed up, but only on the top of the shoe. So not on the sides, not on the bottom, just the top of the shoe was scuffed up. Right?
Okay.
The binocular straps on his binoculars were broken. The leather straps, they were leather and they were snapped. So that's a significant thing to happen. And Betty's dress was tattered, which confused them because they didn't even remember getting out of the car. Never mind having something that would warrant them being, in danger. Barney got out of the car, but running back and forth isn't going to scuff up. Like, they said the top of his shoes were basically scraped off. Like they were really damaged. And then sometime in the late afternoon, Betty decides to call her sister Janet, mother of Kathleen Marden, co-author of the book, who claims to remember this phone call firsthand. Again, Kathleen Marden. I just realized what I was saying.
Co-author of the book.
Co-author of the book.
Co-author of the book.
She remembered the phone call firsthand.
She wrote that book?
Remembered it firsthand, the phone call. She fucking got that phone call firsthand. She remembered it.
Because she co-authored the book.
Who she felt would be receptive to the situation. Her sister, Janet. I was going to say Judith. Her sister, Janet, she claimed... Oh, my God. That was so loud. Holy shit.
I don't think that was me. I think something came out.
That was crazy. So she felt her sister Janet would be receptive to the situation, considering her sister claimed that she had seen a UFO in the mid-50s. And now, this is one of those little details that gets glossed over. It's only in this book. It's not in The Interrupted Journey. I don't think that she saw the UFO. And it kind of gets glossed over a lot. But that's kind of important because in most UFO cases or UFO abduction, it is families. They stick with a bloodline for some reason. Yeah. And you can look at it two ways. Either they're doing it on purpose to kind of get, like a sample from one gene pool kind of thing, or it's just just families at a time are just kind of going nuts, which is also honestly feasible. So now the way I told the encounter earlier is exactly what Benny and Barney claimed happened when they told Janet, with Kathleen once again confirming this. After they spoke, Janet called her neighbor, who was a physicist, asking for advice. And this is when the Hills were first advised to report what they saw to Peace Air Force Base. Again, the Air Force Base located in Portsmouth. He also suggested that she brings a compass to the car because he said that if there was any radiation left on the car, if there was a radiation at all left on the car, the compass would spin. What movie is that from? Is that Predator?
Yeah, they do use that
with the compass?
The heat.
What's the movie where the compass spins because there's radiation? It's like a very, very famous movie.
I think it is Predator.
Is it Predator?
It's either Predator or Alien, but I think it's Predator.
It's one of the two. Basically, she brings it out, and when she goes outside, it's raining, right? She says that while examining the car, she notices a few highly polished silver dollar coin-sized marks on her trunk. And she says that they are, like, when I say highly polished, like basically a mirror's edge. Just shy of a mirror type polish, right?
Like they were just marks on her car? Like somebody
presumably the beeping. Those are the contacts of the beeping that they heard on the trunk, right? So while it's raining, she notices that the little coin-sized marks are totally dry. And it's not even like rain is hitting it and the water's just going away. It's not even like it's rolling off. It's not repelling water. It's just it's just vaporizing water, right? She puts the compass next to it and it starts spinning crazy. As soon as it starts to spin, it's almost like the spinning compass is the realization for Betty of what just happened. And she realizes that she's standing in the middle of the street by herself in the rain with a compass to a car, freaking out about aliens, and she has like a fucking nervous breakdown in the middle of the street. She starts screaming.
It's insane.
Barney comes out, the neighbors come out, and they start to see what the fuss is about. And then at this point, this is when they say, we got to contact Peace Air Force Base. Even though Barney was extremely reluctant, they just went ahead and they contacted the base. Enter Project Blue Book.
Uh-oh.
It's Project Blue Book.
Project Blue Book.
It's Project Toothbrush. Tata Puto.
Utabiki Sholo.
It's Project Blue Book is basically like the UFO. It's just
Men in Black.
It's just the UFO. The code name for the government project of seeing UFO, what the fuck is the word?
Reporting on cases.
Sightings, stuff like that, right? They weren't really doing abductions because before this, I will say it in this episode, I'm sure, and the next episode, that this is the first abduction case. That's not necessarily true. It's not the first abduction case. It's not even the only abduction case worldwide. Like the first abduction case wasn't even in the US. It was supposedly in like France in the 1600s. So this isn't the first like UFO abduction technically, but by all means, in terms of popular culture, this is the first UFO abduction, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
This is the one that everyone cares about. This is the one that kind of marks
Well, this kind of sparked pop culture for what we know in terms of the grays and UFOs and flying saucers. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a big, and even Zeta Reticuli, which comes in later. It's not really a spoiler.
It's kind of wild that just
that is easily the smoking gun of the entire thing. That is it's unbelievable evidence, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But anyway,
I'm gonna go home and shit my pants tonight.
you should just use the toilet. You have one. If you aren't aware, there was a time when the government was investigating UFOs. We didn't have to say any of that. I wrote it. Interesting. From 1952 to 1969, with the government both investigating and supposedly covering up encounters from across the country. During this time, they looked deep. I was going to say look, and that says took. You son of a bitch. During this time, they took detailed reports from the public, the hills being no different. After they contacted Peace, they were interviewed by an undisclosed person over the phone who seemed to be very interested, even confirming something was on the radar the night that they had seen the craft, which is kind of fucking crazy.
I wonder what the person sounded like, though, on the phone. Like, who called
They're from New Hampshire, so they just sound like they're from Boston. Everybody just sounds like... Betty sounds like Lois Griffin. That's what Betty sounds like. I just realized Betty sounds exactly like Lois Griffin, but just deeper. That's what everyone...
Peter.
Yeah. The transcripts on the Hills encounter could be found in Blue Book files, specifically Form 112, number 10-1-61. It recounts the story boiled down to its most objective form, and when it gets to the explanation attached to the end of the report, it seems to explain every encounter away while simultaneously totally disregarding the details that it's given the page before. So it's going to give you, I'm going to read it because I have it. I copy and pasted the entire thing. So we're going to go through it. And it gives points. It's 8 points, and it basically puts down everything that we said. What I'm about to read now is the report of the conclusion of what they got from Benny and Barney.
This is how they wrapped up the Benny and Barney.
This is how they try to explain it away. Okay, and now I'm going to read what it is, and then I'm going to read what they say in the book to more or less disprove it using their own, this file. It's insane. Like, it's really fucking stupid. On one page, this says this, and then on the page before it, the same exact report says something totally different. It's wild. Because this is all they need to put to the public. The rest doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They could redact the rest. So, number one. The Barney Hill sighting was investigated by officials from Peace Air Force Base. The case was carried as insufficient data in the Air Force files. Previously, this is according to the book, it was listed as a Brethren version, not that there was insufficient data. And they even said that they saw Jupiter, and it was an optical illusion of the planet Jupiter that was stalking them on the road when they pulled over and then abducted them into a craft.
Beamed onto their car and shook the entire road.
It's nuts. It
spread out its Jupiter wings and went...
Yeah. He looked in Jupiter's windows and saw Jupiter's men standing there. Number two, there was no direction. Azimuth. That's direction in for planes, it turns out.
What did you just say?
Azimuth.
Azarath,
Azimuth?
Synthos.
There was no direction being reported, and there were no inconsistencies in that report, which isn't true, because as I said in the story that I said earlier, which is their account, it traveled south and then went into an angle of not 45 degrees and went all around the thing. She thought it was a satellite. That's the whole reason that was happening. Number three, the sightings occurred at midnight, and the object was observed for at least 1/2 hour. I'm sorry. Fuck. Jesus Christ. 3. The sighting occurred about midnight, and the object was observed for at least 1 hour. And again, the page before, it literally says they watched it for 30 minutes. Number 4, no specific details on maneuverability were given. Again, we just went over that. Number 5, the planet Jupiter was southwest at about 20 degrees elevation and would set at the approximate time that the object disappeared. Without positional data, the case could not be evaluated as Jupiter. So the page before, they say it's Jupiter, and then here they say there's not enough data to say it's Jupiter, but it's probably Jupiter. But the problem is that they weren't facing southwest. They were facing northwest. So that doesn't make any sense. That's a total different direction. And again, the page before, I can't say it enough, the page fucking before. There was a strong inversion in the area. And an inversion is when there's a layer of warm air trapped under a layer of cool air. And what it could do is, if you've ever heard of the Flying Dutchman, which is the ghost ship, what you're seeing is an illusion of a ship floating in the sky, and it's because of that temperature different. It's if you've ever grilled like outside and you look and you see like the heat lines, it's kind of the same thing, but just a super extreme version of that could mirror what you're seeing and make you feel like you're seeing it above it. So they said that it could have been that. But the Mount Washington Observatory that night reported it is possible a weak aversion set up in the valleys overnight, as the valley's locations are more prone to whatever effects of the sun, blah, blah, blah. Basically, there was no aversion that night. So that's out. Number 7, the actual light source is not known. There was no vertical nor lateral movement was noted, and the object was in all probability Jupiter. 2 points before this, it says that it wasn't Jupiter.
Yeah.
And then it says, again, there was no light and there was no movement. Again, false. 8. No evidence was presented to indicate that the object was due to anything other than natural causes. It's so fucking ridiculous.
How has the Hill case not been part of disclosure yet?
It's because there's nothing to disclose. Everything was disclosed already. Where before they hid it? Like, we're in the era before it was, we have to hide the UFO stuff. We can't let the public know. They're openly talking to the public about UFOs right now. We are in an unprecedented time at this point for this whole thing, right? So, like, they didn't start hiding shit yet. They're still, like, talking to the public and saying, like, we're going to figure this out together. And then at one point, they're like, holy shit. No, we're not. You can't know about it. We need Bluetooth. You get it?
No.
Cool. After the Air Force. After the seemingly useless interaction with the Air Force, Betty would continue to question their experience, strongly against the will of Barney, who wanted it to just all go away. He just wanted it to fucking stop. He was tired of talking to people. He said, we already told the Air Force. What else could we do? They are the Air Force. Let them do their thing, right? And it was around this time that a perfect ring of warts had shown up above his penis. But we'll talk more about that later. He conceded something strange had happened, but he would often lose his temper with Betty over her insistence to tell their friends. I had to. Just
her name was Tanya. That was something strange.
Wait, we're going to get into that. You don't understand the amount of pictures of genital warts I looked up just so that I can understand if it's fucking remotely possible for this to happen. And I'm not a doctor, and I can tell you I don't think it is. But we're going to get into that. So as they were in the same town as the Air Force Base, a lot of their friends knew what they had seen before they even told them, because they had just kind of it spread all over the town. It's kind of interesting to tell someone. And I said this already. I said this all before. That's why it's just because of who he was and where he was and the situation he was in. He felt like he needed to work harder than everyone around him to have the same stature, which was true. But Betty just couldn't shake the feeling like something more was at play and became obsessed with finding out. On top of everything, Betty started to have strange nightmares about 10 days after the event. She would wake up and write down the nightmares of men capturing her and bring her into a ship. She would experience these over 5 days, with the dreams seemingly telling a full story, segmented, out of order. So she kind of put it together herself in her journal. It was like, oh, well, I guess that makes sense. This happened before this. And she came up with the story based on her dreams. This drove Betty totally wild, and she continued to try to find answers. All of this would lead to a myriad of different UFO researchers coming to her aid and trying to make sense of everything. One of these people is Donald Kehoe, founder of NICAP. We have said historically in this show that NICAP stands for the National Inquiry of Capturing Ass Pirates. Now, that's not what it stands for, guys. I gotta come clean. Okay,
Hold on. No.
I gotta come clean.
What are you talking about? That's what it stands for. I spent an hour and a half here of you telling me what it stood at.
Yeah, it's just I like to think that there's a comma after ass, so it's like the National Inquiry of Capturing Ass Pirates. You know?
So you're addressing the pirates.
I have
like
to.
It
stands for
capturing ass.
The National
Pirates,
Inquiry of
capturing ass.
Aerial Phenomenon. The National Inquiry of
capturing ass.
Capturing aerial
capturing ass.
Capturing ass. Yeah, so that's not what it is, but it's okay. It's okay. NICAP and Donald Kehoe were featured on 2 other episodes that we've done before, which is Woodrow Darrenberger and the Black Knight Satellite, both featuring Mike. Both of them are fantastic.
What?
Another nightcap investigator, you son of a bitch. Another nightcap investigator, Walter Webb, would take over for Kehoe in the investigation and continue to help the Hill. So basically, Donald Kehoe got involved to get the connection going, but this is technically like he works for the government. So this is not Nightcap isn't a government agency, but it's basically run by government people, if that makes sense.
It does.
It's the most official of all of the UFO researching groups by far in the U.S.
As of now, still.
No, at the time,
Okay.
I don't think now.
I feel like ATIP
now we have
is,
now we have Space Force, so
that
now we have
too.
a military branch. That's
a good point.
So Walter Webb took over because Donald Kehoe was, the founder of the foundation. He's not going to investigate everything himself, so he sent an investigator. And Walter Webb would be instrumental to spreading the story. We will get to that next episode. So he would continue to help the Hills and give them advice on what to do next. It was during this time that the Hills started to become more comfortable, though always Betty more than Barney. That being said, they would do a few public interviews, and Walter would write an article further spreading the story. And after months and months of searching for an answer, one thing kept coming up with everyone around them. They should try hypnosis therapy. And with that, join us next week as we get into the hypnosis sessions, life after abduction, and Barney's upper penis area, as we visit part 2 of Betty and Barney Hill.
The bush.
The bush.
The bush.
So that's part 1 of Betty and Barney Hill. I hope you appreciate it, because it's a lot of information. So this is at part 1 of Betty and Barney Hill. Please come back for part 2. It's going to give a lot of context to what's happening. We're going to go into all that stuff. We're going to get into what could have possibly been all that fun juice of a steak. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure you subscribe it, like it, make sure you talk to it, bop it, pull it, twist it, and fuck it in its... I don't know. I'm just molested. Thank you, Chris. Molest the subscribe. Oh, look at the cat. Oh, she's so fucking cute. Make sure you molest that subscribe button. Tell your grandma about the show. And don't get those two confused. And you have a great day. Don't go into a field. You might. I'm a rabbit.